So, Heba, I have some questions for you right out the gate that I've prepared specifically for you, and what I like to call the Hero's Gauntlet, which you might have heard because with other episodes, because you said you listened to a few of my other episodes.
Oh, yes.
Now, did you listen to those just to kind of like feel me out to see like what kind of questions I ask or like what?
No, actually, so you started showing up, not obviously like you directly, but I started seeing like posts about the podcast. And then I realized that we have some pretty cool friends in common. And so I was like, okay, I need to figure out like more about this person and why they're showing up on like people you might know or recommended friends or whatever. And so that's actually what got me started. And my very first podcast that I listened to was yours with General Goldfein. And
Oh,
so
that's
I was
awesome.
like, yeah, I was pretty much hooked because I had this really incredible opportunity to work with General Goldfein when I was a staffer on the Hill. And so, yeah, he's just an awesome person. And I was really excited to hear, the conversation. So yes, that's kind of how I started my stalking of the profile and of your podcast for sure.
And I'm so sad now too because like I still do pop up on people's like recommended friends, but I'm capped out at 5,000 now, so I can't be added anymore, but I switched it to where I could be followed, but I can't add a friend at this point unless I delete someone. So it's just like, oh my God,
Wow. Well, it's
sucks.
good. I will understand if you have to drop me as a friend.
No,
I
Heba, you are not being dropped. You have nothing to worry about with that. That will never happen.
appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Okay, so you ready to go through the hero's gauntlet? Instead of
I'm
three
ready. Let's do
questions,
it. Let's
instead
go.
of instead of three, I have five for you.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm
Yes, so
ready.
we're gonna just start with these five. All right, first question. When you hear the term military spouse, what comes to mind?
Oh, this is a really good question. And I actually maybe inadvertently prepared for it. When I hear military spouse, I hear like loyal, like straight, like loyalty, right? I actually believe that military spouses never really meet each other. We just like recognize each other. So it's something, and maybe military members feel this way too, but it's something like, oh, you're a military spouse. Oh my gosh, I'm a military spouse. And there's this instant like friendship and recognition of, oh my gosh, like we're going to become, best friend kind of, so there's
Right,
this
Step
immediate
Brothers moment.
friendship.
Did we just become best friends? Yep.
Exactly. Like, oh my gosh, you're a military. So I think it's that unique kinship of just shared experience, and knowing right
Right.
out the gate that, hey, this person and I have something in common. Maybe we have nothing else in common, but what we have in common is that we're military spouses. So that's what I think of as that loyalty and that friendship.
Right. And, especially coming from you, Hebo, because you have an incredible background, right? Like you've worked on Capitol Hill, and I mean, to uproot you and move you around, that's kind of a big deal, for you to do that for your spouse, right?
Yeah, and I will tell you, I got really lucky. So I think I may have like lucked out early a little bit. I peaked early as a military spouse. I didn't even become a military spouse until 2018. So at that point, and I'm sure, you probably have seen this, and maybe we'll talk about it later too, but my husband's an Air Force bandsman. So it's a really unique career field, and one that, airmen come into via an audition. And so it's really different in that case, even though they go to basic training, right? They do all of the other, fulfill all the other requirements of being a military uniformed member. He had to audition for this opportunity. And so when he, finally decided, he was like, oh, this is something I'm actually interested in. It was kind of a surprise because we hadn't really talked about it before, but he's like, no, this is what I want to do. And he comes from a long family legacy of Air Force bands. And
Wow.
so it was kind of incredible. And, the kind of like promise that we made to, one another early on was that we were both obviously very career driven and said, okay, we're always going to try to support each other as best we can. But I would tell people, doing my job on Capitol Hill, I was one of 100. Well, him doing his job in the United States Air Force, he's one of like 50.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was too good to pass up, and
Right.
just became a really unique opportunity. And I'll be honest with you, definitely the pros have outweighed the cons. even
That's
though the career
fantastic.
stuff, yeah, the career stuff has been challenging, but like I said, the pros have definitely outweighed the cons.
That's great to hear. And I love, the military band. I got to see like, where they practice and train at, I want to say it was at Bowling Air Force
Sure.
Base. Yeah, they have a huge Air Force band, center at Bowling Air Force Base. They also have base honor guard or Air Force Honor Guard there. So I got to see all sorts of really cool stuff, especially with the Air Force band, and I've seen them perform numerous times. And yeah, I mean they're pretty talented people for sure.
Yeah, so there was really no question. And I actually, like I said, I kind of lucked out because our first assignment was in Colorado Springs, Colorado with the Air Force Academy.
Oh
And
wow,
so I was in DC working for Senator Boozman of Arkansas, which is my home state, not was, but is my home state. It's where I grew up, went to school. So that was a great opportunity. And then when we found out that, my spouse had won this audition, he was going to be joining the Air Force, he's going to basic, we're really about to become this like military family. I actually got very fortunate because Senator Cory Gardner from Colorado had a position in his Colorado Springs office and was like, hey, if you'll come work for me, I'd love to have you on my
wow,
team.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh,
So I rolled off of one payroll, August 12th, and on August 13th, 2018, it was my very first day working for Senator Cory Gardner in Colorado Springs. And it was fantastic. There was no break in my service. There was no break in my healthcare, nothing. So that was really special to me that, those two sitting elected officials found a way for me to continue doing the job that I really loved and
wow.
enjoyed. And yeah. And then unfortunately, when he wasn't reelected in 2020, we had actually received orders to Germany. So then I started my journey of figuring out how to get employed overseas, and that was quite the experience for sure.
Wow, so you went from like absolutely killing it, just amazing career field, doing an amazing job, big things, and then you go overseas and you get that military spouse perspective where you're essentially starting from scratch. No one knows who you are. You have this reputation as just a spouse along with that military member, and then you are trying to get a job in that climate. And I'm sure that was pretty eye-opening for you. So, and we will get to that. We will
Okay.
get to that. But you're killing it so far. You're doing amazing. So we're going to go into the second question. What would you tell a spouse that feels hopeless with his or her impact to the Air Force or their base?
Oh my gosh, you're going to probably make me cry. There's that quote, right? That never underestimate what a select few, right, people can do to change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has, kind of thing. I cannot tell you, if I were talking to a military spouse, and I've had this conversation a lot over this last year, right, in particular, but I would just tell them, if not you, if you're really a passionate person about a topic or an issue, and you've gone through something and you don't want someone behind you or that next spouse or that next military family to go through that experience, then why not? Like, you could be the problem solver. Maybe you bring forward the solution set that someone hasn't thought about before, because either they don't have the experience that you have or they don't have the knowledge that you have. So whatever you're going to bring to the table, whatever you're willing to bring to the table, you are absolutely part of that solution, if you want to be, and I know there's a lot of pressure sometimes on military spouses feeling like they have to be involved in certain ways in the community. That's not necessarily true. Sometimes the best way that you can help is to be a sounding board for others, or to just lend your story, right, to an organization or to another advocate who maybe is working on that problem solving issue. So I hope that military spouses really never underestimate what they can do in their local communities, at their local installation, even if they're geographically separated, right? That's a lived experience and a shared experience they need to maybe be willing to provide to decision makers. And so no matter where you are in life, what station you are in life, I don't care about your rank. If you're someone who likes to get after problems or has a story to share, just don't underestimate the impact that could have on the whole conversation.
Wow, I love that. That's beautiful. And I've been in that position myself too, where you get no and doors closed on you because it's always been that way. And then, a light bulb kind of goes off where you could be that change. You could take this thing and make it happen, with what you have internally. And I've done that, and I've been through that. And so I can definitely relate with the feeling. And there's no worse feeling to me than feeling small and hopeless. And so, I never want to revisit that feeling again. And I'm totally on board with you. Anyone that's feeling that way now needs to really understand that they have more power in their life and in their surroundings than they ever could realize.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You do. And it's just, I love to try to share stories with spouses too about times when a constituent, right, would call the office. And oftentimes I worked on the veteran and military portfolio, right? So the defense and VA issue portfolios. And oftentimes, I spent a lot of time on the phone with veterans and military family members, because military members were usually pretty shy about talking to a congressional staffer. But talking to those veterans and often hearing their story, the reason they would get to the point of calling a member of Congress, right, is because everything had gone wrong. Like everything was on fire, like just falling around them. And it was out of a matter of desperation, right? Like, I don't know where else to turn, so I called you. Can you help me? And realizing that just the fact that they stepped into their own agency, they stepped into their own power to be their own best advocate, it does make a huge difference. And something that I find really special about you and this podcast is that you're really vulnerable about how you had to go through that process too. But there's something really empowering when you realize that, oh, I not only can help myself, but I can help my brothers and sisters alongside me. I can help other families. And so it's a really like life shifting experience, but a really important one, and important that we share that experience with others too, so they know it's okay.
Definitely.
It's okay to step into that vulnerability.
Absolutely. And I just feel, so happy that, I think you're like a spouse, like mentor or advocate of some sort. I think I read online when I was, looking into your background, and you definitely strike me as a mentor and someone who could help them believe in themselves, just by your passion. I can feel it just talking to you over Zoom. And so I think the impact that you have has probably been tremendous. So I wanted to also take a minute to thank you for everything you've poured into us and other spouses out there.
No, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I've been this last year, I was nominated actually by an Army spouse in 2021, and was then selected early, spring of 2022 to be the Armed Forces Insurance Air Force Spouse of the Year. And so alongside, with 6 other branch winners, we have been going to events, having conversations, being invited into, different discussions and different organizational kind of meetings and stuff, just to talk about, advocacy and what that means. And it has been such an eye-opening year. And I think probably the greatest reward really for me is not just the friendships, but seeing how many spouses are out there just absolutely, they're killing it. Like they're out there advocating for, anti-bullying in schools for our military affiliated children. They're out there, fighting for housing, right? For affordable and safe housing for our military members and their families, food insecurity. I mean, they're just working across this entire spectrum of military life and the military life cycle. And I honestly just couldn't be prouder to be a part of their team. And so it's been a lot of fun, and really, really proud of them. So thanks for that.
Definitely.
It's really their efforts that have made all of this possible.
Absolutely. And, I know we still have 3 questions left, but just while we're on this particular part, we talked a little bit about when I was at AFSA and I went to the spouse panel, right? And I remember going to that just kind of curious as to like what they were going to talk about, you know what I mean? I didn't really have an expectation going in, but I can tell you I left with my mind freaking blown, because I did not expect the spouses to be making a larger impact than I see most airmen serving create. Like I did not expect it to surpass what I've seen, fellow airmen attempt to do. I never in a million years thought it would be that huge of things that they were pulling off. And I was completely blown away because, there was nothing to gain from it. It was all out of like the kindness of their heart that they were doing these things. You know what I mean? There was no career move. There was no EPR bullet for them. So not only were they doing tremendous things that were changing lives, but they were doing it out the kindness of their heart. And I was just like, holy cow, like this is crazy. Like this is how are they doing this? Like this is unbelievable. So, and that's why I talk with General Goldfein specifically about spouses, because of that experience I had, and I knew he was an advocate for that as well. So I made sure to give them that shout out.
Yeah, I love that. It's really funny because I actually think that panel was up against, I want to say it was like General Whiting was maybe in the next room talking about space, which, hey, nerd, probably 5-6 years ago, I would have been in his briefing, right? Like listening to what's going on with space. And yeah, tell me about all the, so I definitely appreciate, that you came, and it was kind of daunting. They announced like all the panelists and we're walking up there and I'm like doing these breathing exercises so I don't actually hyperventilate.
Right.
And I look out into the audience and, you can only see, like, you've been on these stages before where you can only see like 2 or 3 rows in before it's like too dark.
Like, yeah, exactly. But really it's a packed house. It's like a ton of people.
Well, so first when we were there the day before, I went and so I did my own advance, right? I was like, I'm gonna go find the room because I want to know where we're going to be. I just want to stick my head in, see what it kind of looks like, just so, it helps like kind of calm my nerves a little bit. And I used to do that all the time for work anyway. And so I like find this room and I stick my head in, and the day before it was like half of its size. So it had grown, it doubled in size by the time we got there. And so I was already super anxious. And then, like I said, they do all the announcements. We go sitting up there and they tell us like, hey, your mics are going to be hot once, Mrs. Brown asks you a question. So be careful. And so I'm already just, trying to, calm down. And next thing I know, I see, General Brown's right there on the front row. Chief Bass is right next to him. General Thomas is sitting over there. And then now, General Miller from A1 is sitting right there. So I was like, okay, all right.
That's quite the front row.
I was like, okay. And, it's so important to, like we can speak truth with kindness, but I also was like kind of realizing that moment, I was like, okay, we're going to say things and I'm going to be super kind about it, but we're going to have some honesty and some truth here. And I really again, I just cannot tell you how much I appreciated how many people showed up to that conversation. I feel like it could have been another hour and, take questions on the whole thing. And then when I walked out, believe it or not, I was stopped by so many uniformed members. They were like, we had no idea that's how congressional inquiries happen. We had no idea people were coming to y'all and saying, asking for help about things. And it started this, an even more, involved conversation about how do people communicate with one another, with the Department of the Air Force, how do we help them solve problems to the left of a mental health crisis, right? All of those issues. And yeah, it was a wild experience.
Yeah.
Wild experience. So
I'm so happy you got to, do that. That's amazing. It
was fun.
Definitely. Okay. Are you ready for what are we on the third question? We're off to a great start, by the way.
Good. I hope so.
Because I thought I knew these questions would be perfect for you. Okay, so number 3, what is your thoughts on the male military spouse and finding their role within the spouse community?
Oh, that is a great question. Because we actually have two male spouses as a part of our class of 2022, both representing the Navy and the Marine Corps, Vinny and Sergio. And really, the importance of male spouses and having their voice, right, in these conversations and having that seat at the table is that it helps us see sometimes the unconscious bias that as a nature, as a natural effect of some of these programs having been stood up in the 50s and the 60s, you know, when we didn't really have obviously as many female service members. You know, naturally, we didn't have many male military spouses. And so now their voice is really helpful in making sure that as we stand up, you know, policies, programs, and initiatives, that they are gender neutral, right? That they're accessible to all military spouses, regardless of their gender or their background or their citizenship, you know, so there are all sorts of issues and challenges that, you know, society has changed. And so, maybe I shouldn't call them issues and challenges, but considerations and things that we just need to think about. And maybe we didn't necessarily have that same need, right? Because society looked very different when the all volunteer force began, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And by the way, I know a male spouse. He's my neighbor, and his name is Seneca Seeley. And he is my favorite male spouse of all time. Like, this guy, you know, he does CrossFit. He's in great shape. He goes to school. He takes care of the kids. Like, he's just an incredible guy. And so he's probably one of my best friends now. And so when I, you know, thought about that question, he's the one that, you know, was really coming to mind for that question.
Yeah. I mean, I could ask you the same, like, you know, you just said like, hey, this is a rock star spouse who's like, you know, really taking care of things and taking care of life and family while their spouse is serving. And so, yeah, it really is incredible what spouses are capable of doing generally, but it's really unbelievable what today's military spouses in particular are doing. And so I love that, you know, I love that you have someone next door that is a great example of that.
Absolutely. All right, let's go to the fourth question now.
Oh boy.
How can I, as an active duty service member, empower my spouse?
I love that question. And let me tell you how my active duty service member empowers me as a spouse.
Okay.
And how I hope other service members will consider doing the same. So my spouse, when this award was kind of first coming up, and when we first moved to Germany, and I was having a hard time, you know, getting employed overseas, and ended up, you know, being a contractor, right, and freelancing for work, you know, he was my biggest advocate in whatever my choice was going to be. So there was no, oh, this is how it is. This is how the military works. This is what we chose to do because we volunteered for this assignment, right? So there was none of that, and there was a whole heck of a lot more for, well, what can we do? What do you want to do? What can I support you in doing? And making sure too that whenever he had the opportunity to be in conversations take surveys, right, or whatever, discussions about issues that are impacting military families, you know, he had my permission to share my story with senior leaders or with decision makers and say, look, my spouse has, you know, almost a decade's worth of federal experience. She needs 14 more months to get her full federal retirement, but she couldn't get hired even with her military spouse, you know, yada, yada, yada. And so it's as much about, you know, yes, him empowering me to be active, or as much of an active advocate as I want to be, but it's also about him being an advocate for me in the conversations where I'm not invited. Right. Or
yeah, that's a good point. It's like your two pieces of it's like your two halves, you know, fighting two different battles that have the same desired outcome.
Absolutely. So it's also about, you know, and I think there's been a shift in momentum, and maybe you can help me, you know, determine if this is like just from my perspective or in reality it's actually happening. But it seems like military members and military spouses alike are becoming much more vocal about what they need. You know,
yes, yeah, there's been a lot of changes. You know, I've been in 18 years now, so I've seen a lot of changes. And, you know, I would say social media obviously has made that more common. But I thought, to me personally, I think the change really doubled, if not tripled, was during COVID. And I say that because we were, the majority of us were on lockdown and we had to use the internet as an outlet and to communicate. I mean, that's why my podcast exists, because the culture shifted that dramatically. How many active duty podcasts like mine were there before COVID? I would say I didn't know of any. Now I could tell you at least 10, and it's all because of that lockdown. To me, I think that changed everything and made vocalizing our opinions online much more normalized.
Yeah, I think you're right. And so it's good to hear that people feel like they have agency, right, to speak up for themselves. And look, that's not to say that, I was just reading the article online about, the trespasser on Andrews. That's horrible, right? That's inappropriate. Like, that's too far, right? If that's
Right.
someone who has a grievance or has an issue or whatever, like, there is a way, there's like a very real and acceptable and respectful, right, way to have these conversations and say, hey, look, this program is great, but it can't, or I can't access it. Think about something like the basic needs allowance, right? There's a lot of conversation about that right now. And, this was, in theory, this was a great concept, great idea, but I can't access it because of A, B, C, D, or E. And so, help me understand what are the other options for me, right? As a military member, military family. There are ways to have those conversations and to be a good advocate for yourself without, crossing the line into, being physically aggressive or acting out in certain ways. And so I do think that giving military members and families those tools to express those needs and express those concerns in a productive way is kind of what's next on our list of things to do, to bring the community alongside us.
Definitely. And I'm all about that. Like, my theory, like with the podcasting, was because a lot of people are like, wow, you talk about some subjects sometimes, like, is that okay? And, to that, I say those talks are going to happen no matter what. The benefit that I have and any guest that I have is that we can, exactly what you said, it's going to be productive. It's going to be like a safe way to talk about it, and it's going to be healing, and it's going to bring positive change to our lives, hopefully, so that's at our core, with what I do. That's the type of messages, even around sensitive subjects, that I try to, get out there.
Yeah. I'll tell you, just out of complete honesty here, I have lost a lot of friends to suicide, like so many of them, classmates, from high school, and it's really, it's a huge challenge, and it is hard to talk about. And I was 22 months into being a military spouse when we lost our first military member. I was a brand new key spouse. It was in 2020, so it was during COVID. There was a lot, like you mentioned, there was a lot going on. And something that really struck me as being very curious was just how little people seem to want to talk about the fact that this tragedy just occurred. How are we even going to start fixing something or start getting after something if we can't even say it out loud?
Absolutely.
And so I just, that was really tough. And I think, like I mentioned earlier, we had gotten orders to Germany. So we were in the middle of a PCS OCONUS, and, my spouse left. And so we were apart for the last several months of 2020. And then I get to Germany and I start applying, for jobs, and the multitude of rejections that I got, I can joke about it now, but the many rejections that I got for positions that I thought I was pretty well qualified for was so devastating that I myself started to experience some real internal mental health challenges and struggles.
But one thing that you said that real quick that really jumps out at me, you said that we can't even find it within ourselves to say it out loud, and when I first started like my podcast, I thought about, I've gone through a lot of really tough times. I could send you an article I've never released that kind of outlines everything in my life. but I went through a lot of trauma. I've done military funeral honors. I've lost a lot of friends too. And it does seem to wear you out, especially when you're constantly reminded of people losing their lives. It tends to really get to you. But I remember I started going to therapy, and I was like, this person never really gave me an outline or path as to what to do. So like, why am I feeling better from these sessions? Like, it was really confusing to me. And I thought about it, and I was finding the courage to say things out loud. And, that has stuck with me forever into this podcast. Even in one of the descriptions of the podcast, I say we find the courage to say it out loud. So the fact that you said that exact line, that's something that goes through my mind like almost daily, when confronting like my own feelings and thoughts.
Yeah. And, gosh, to your point too, because I had, sought therapy here and was lucky enough to get some. And just this like recognition of, hey, guess what? Sometimes when you say things out loud, it doesn't just help you. Sometimes you say something out loud and maybe someone who wasn't ready to say it out loud says, oh my gosh, me too. And so there's definitely a healing power in it for yourself, but there could also be a healing power in it for those around you and those, alongside you. And I think my husband knew that I was like really struggling, but I couldn't tell him what I needed. I couldn't tell him what I, like, oh, beyond just like fix this situation for me. There wasn't like, I didn't have enough bandwidth to figure out like, okay, this is what would definitely make me feel better kind of thing. I just knew that I was lost and didn't really know, but knew that, oh my gosh, if I'm having this kind of trouble, I can't imagine what other spouses might be going through. And we're all kind of stuck over here together. So that's kind of when I started really reaching out to other spouses locally and having these conversations with them. And I will say too, there are some really amazing and incredible spouses who are they're so inspirational and they're so motivating. I mean, they reach out to people they don't even know. And I know because they would reach out to me. Like, I can't tell you how many Facebook messages I received after my profile like went public for the Spouse of the Year program. And just spouses saying, hi, I'm so-and-so. You don't know me, but I just read your profile. And I just wanted to say, like, if there's anything I can do to help you, will you please contact me? Or, hi, my name is so-and-so. You don't know me, but I know we have this mutual friend. And they said you could help me, I work for an organization and we're going to Capitol Hill. Like, would you? So I found my purpose there and found a lot of just, again, motivation and drive to say, okay, well, I can't solve all of the world's problems, but I know policy work. Like, I know it like the back of my hand. It's what I can do. And so how do I use that gift and that skill to help other spouses and other families? And so it's just all about perspective. It's all about perspective. And I'm really glad that you're saying things out loud and you're encouraging others to do it too, because it's super important. And they never know who they might find that, who they might inspire to join them.
Definitely. And also that before you got cut off or before our internet went out or whatever, the specific situation you mentioned was you came from this amazing background with amazing jobs and connections and networking and experience. And that didn't get you too far as a military spouse in a new area. And it was demoralizing. And, being in that headspace of like questioning your own worth, I think that's one of the scariest like places to be psychologically. And I've been there too. And people still try to put you there, as maybe they don't like the way, whatever, they don't like something about you, and they try to shut your light out. And they try to put you in that headspace. And so it's happened to me once really brutally before. And ever since then, I've had a huge focus on knowing who I am, knowing what I'm worth, and knowing what my potential is, to the point where some negative people out there aren't going to put my light out, but it does take practice and it does take work.
Yeah, I was actually, I'd love to ask you about that. Because obviously in the military, like awards and recognition are a really big thing. And so when I worked on Capitol Hill, that wasn't a thing. So it's like, oh, hey, my success is your success, is our boss's success, and overall, ultimately, actually, the nation's success, right? If we do this right. So I'm curious if that's something that in the military as a service member, that you have to kind of always be mindful of the fact, like, hey, I need my teammate to be like catastrophically successful so that I too can be catastrophically successful, that it's a team effort.
I do see that. Yes.
Yeah.
I do see that. And I wouldn't say, I mean, I've never seen it in a negative way. Every time I've seen it, it was always a genuine desire for that person to succeed. Does it benefit all of us as well? Absolutely. But I've seen some amazing things come out of those award experiences. I mean, we just had an airman get selected as a nurse, and she commissioned, and she's an officer. And a lot of that stemmed from us believing in her, supporting her, and encouraging her, even though time after time she was rejected for the program. When on that final last year that we all really pushed for her and encouraged her, she became an airman, like annual award winner for the wing. And obviously that played a factor in her becoming a nurse. And now she's living her best life, in California as an officer. So, there might be some intentions to like help the whole team with pushing someone forward, but 9 times out of 10, it's coming from a place of like actually like caring about that person and wanting to see them succeed so that they can experience, the thrill of being the center of attention for a little bit for all the incredible things they've done.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how this military spouse program is too, right? And the awesome part being that I met military spouses that aren't obviously Air Force spouses. They're, spouses of the Space Force, Marine Corps, Navy, National Guard, Coast Guard, and Army. And so we all came from different backgrounds, but we all have like this just crazy desire to help people. So yeah, I love that. And getting to be recognized alongside them for our efforts and our work, and then supporting one another through, the things that we're working on now it's a really special kind of bond.
I bet it is. Okay. Question number 5.
Okay.
What is your proudest moment as an Air Force spouse?
Hands down, proudest moment was being recognized by General Brown and Mrs. Brown at our annual town hall and recognition luncheon last May. So May of 22. They read off your bio and you get to have lunch with, the chief of staff and his spouse, and you're sitting there and for a solid hour, like having, their attention, and him asking me questions like, hey, what do we need to be doing better? What are you working on? What can I do to help you? What do you enjoy about being a military spouse? And what do you find challenging about being a military spouse? That to me was like definitely the most special thing. And also that General Brown took a selfie with me.
I love that.
So, there was
That's
like
amazing.
literally like so hundreds of people standing like ready to take this photo. And he's like, oh no, I got this. And he's like reaching out his arm. So remind me, I'll send it to you because it's hilarious and awesome all at once.
I'll make that the cover for your episode.
Yeah, will you please? It's
no, absolutely.
hysterical.
But no, I had one of those surreal moments myself, but I think those moments are beautiful because, well, for one, they're unexpected, right? Like you find out you're selected, you're not really quite sure like what that means, but then when it all unfolds, you're pretty much treated like a special guest, right? By people who are like incredibly up there running the world essentially, and you have their undivided attention and they're like highlighting you as like the special guest, and there's really nothing else like it. It's completely surreal, Yeah. And I got a taste of that myself after my time in Honor Guard. I was a 12 Outstanding Airman of the Year for Global Strike. and I got to go to Global Strike headquarters. I got to hang out with the command chief and the 4-star General Ray, and have dinner at their house. And my mind was just, my head exploded. I'm like, this is insane. Like, how is this happening?
Yeah.
But what made it really special for me in particular was that my dad won the same award when he was a tech sergeant, and I was like a 2-year-old. And it's a story I heard like my whole life. He had like this pamphlet from the night of the event. It was like his proudest moment. So it's a story I always heard of. Never in a million years thought that would be me one day. Like it seemed like some impossible thing. And then I got to share that night with him. He was my guest. And we were at the dinner, the award ceremony. And you want to talk about a surreal moment. I couldn't believe what was unfolding in front of me, that I was repeating history on something I never thought would be in my life. And it was with my dad. So it was just, those are really special, points in our life that we'll never forget.
Yeah. I love that so much. So my parents, well, my husband was TDY, so he couldn't come to the luncheon, but my parents and my sister came. And it was kind of funny because all of a sudden I was wearing like a sleeveless dress. I mean, you'll see this in the photo, but I remember my dad like kind of coming up to me and my dad has been losing his hearing for some time. It's fine. But he kind of comes up to me, he's like whispering in my ear and he goes, "Hey, that's General Brown, right? He's the chief of staff." I was like, "Yes, Dad." I was like, "Yes, that's a General Brown. Like, act cool, Dad." And then next thing I know, he comes back. He goes, "Hey, that's General Raymond, right? Like, isn't he the chief for space?" I was like, "Yeah, it's called the Chief of Space Operations, Dad. Yes, and he's the first one. Yes, it's like yes, Dad." I was like, "Please calm down."
It's kind of like you're a teenager again, telling your dad to not embarrass you.
Like, please stop embarrassing me right now, right? At like the school dance or graduation or whatever the event was as a teenager. But yeah, and then Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Raymond, came over and said hi to my parents, and we all got this photo together. But yes, sharing those moments with parents. And, my dad had to do conscripted military service in Egypt because they're both naturalized citizens. But I think, him seeing these like larger than life people to most people. And again, such a good reminder that like when we get to be in those rooms, when we get to be a part of those conversations, it's really so special and so rare, right? And not to take that for granted. But I was really excited that I got to share that with my parents. They were just like my dad was like really freaking out. He was having such a moment. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't think he can take any more excitement today. This is like,"
you're like, "You need to go to bed early."
Yeah. I was
You need
like,
some
"Okay,
rest.
We're tapped out now. Everyone's going to sleep. No more fun. No more seeing people, that you recognize on TV." But yeah, it was fantastic. So that's definitely my surreal. And I love that you shared that with your dad. That's, gosh,
Yeah.
he must have been just over the moon.
Oh yeah. It was pretty emotional night for us. And, you see these weird coincidences and things where it almost feels like fate in a way, just because the coincidences get so bizarre sometimes. And, one that happened that night was we were sitting, all of the Global Strike leadership was at every table, right? Like chiefs and generals and whatever, they all run 8th Air Force and Global Strike. And there was a chief at our table who was next to my dad, and they got to talking. And my dad grew up as a poor kid in West Virginia. He ended up being an airman himself and retiring as a commander. And so, he has this rags to riches kind of story, but he came from this really rare part of West Virginia that I think they changed the town name since then. So like people don't even know like what this town's original name was. But this lady that he sat next to was from that same town. And like it was the weirdest feeling. It was like, this was like meant to be, like this night. Like it was so trippy.
What are the odds of that happening?
Yeah, he picked up on her accent. He was like, "You're from West Virginia." Like he could tell. But then to be from that same like town, it was just like, it was just a crazy coincidence. Okay, so you passed the Hero's Gauntlet, but however, I do have one bonus question for you.
Can't wait. I love bonus questions.
Okay, so here's the bonus question before we hit your topics. And I'm sorry that there are so many questions, but I
It's
knew
okay.
you would love these questions. So the bonus question is this. So on pages like the Airman NCO, Senior NCO, and other type of joke pages, there's tons of memes and people poking fun at the military spouse, at their expense. Maybe they posted something embarrassing, or there's a meme talking about how demanding they might be because their husbands, might be of high rank. What is your thoughts on poking fun at the spouses? Do you think it's harmful? Do you think it's funny yourself? Do you think it sets you back or isolates you? What is your overall thoughts on those jokes?
As a young person, I got bullied a lot, so I don't actually take I don't take too kindly to jokes like that. That being said, I'm also a huge dork and I can laugh at myself because I do ridiculous stuff all the time. And sometimes, the best way to just kind of overcome anything, right, is to just like take a good laugh and that's fine. But when it comes to the jokes about military spouses in particular, it's super offensive. I mean, it's really offensive. So ironically enough, I was actually talking to, the military spouses of the year, 2022, our class. We're really close. We have kind of a message chain that's always going on. And I told him, I said, hey, y'all, I'm supposed to be talking with Josh this week. And what would be a word that you would use to describe military spouses, right? And just asking kind of for their thoughts. Like, how would you want people to describe us? Loyalty came up, friendship, grit, because we are so adaptable and have to be, right? We don't get that choice. So all of those things. But do you know the one word that they said, please, 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 every single one of them was like, please do not use this word, is resilient. They don't want to be known as resilient because it's somehow turned into like this cover for, oh, you can just take it, like, oh, you're a triceratops or you're a dependopotamus or whatever. And if you get upset about that, or if you don't take kindly to that, then you become like this dependa, right? And so it's like, we don't want to be like, no, resilience has nothing to do with like your ability to withstand, bad behavior or being talked down to by others. And I think what's sad is that pages like that, and I follow that page, I'm on that page. And yeah, there are some funny things like, oh, the memes where they talk about, oh, they told you that like this particular platform would be available by this date, and then everything crashes and burns, like, to everyone kind of. So there are some funny jokes like that, but I really dislike like the broad brushstroke of, oh, all military spouses are like this or like that. Look, just like military members, we're a cross section of society too. So,
right. It would be demoralizing to, uproot your whole life to go with this military member to do all these amazing things only to be categorized like in a meme that's not even accurate. I could definitely see that as hurtful, and to be honest, like I see the memes but I don't see it in real life. So like I don't know where that's where the stuff's coming from. Like all the spouses I've ever met, and maybe I'm just lucky, I don't know, but they've all been wonderful people. I have not seen anything that even remotely look like any of those memes out there, so I don't even think they're accurate.
Well, look, I'll be fair. There are some spouses that are really extra. Okay, like let's get real. It's true. There are some that are. There are some spouses that have really unmanageable and unrealistic expectations of what the military is and what the military can be for them. That's not to say that they are bad people, but it's just a lack of expectation management. Between either the serving member and their spouse, their loved one, right? Or, sometimes even the organization, the military as a whole, and how we communicate, to families and to spouses. And I'll tell you one very real way that I felt that is I went to a job fair on base, and I went in a suit because that's what I wore to work every day for, almost 9 years, and went with like 5 copies of my resume that my husband had printed out for me, because our printer is a 110 voltage and doesn't work in our house. So anyway, so he had printed out these copies of my resume, and I go, and we actually were supposed to go on an anniversary trip and had delayed it because this job fair had come up. I walk in and I'm like, okay, you're hyping yourself up. You're like, I can do this. I have been on phone calls with the Secretary of Defense. Like, I can totally do this. Like, I can do a job fair. Haven't been to a job fair in almost a decade, right? Since I'd started working. Mm-hmm. And I go and doing all these things, whatever. And I walked out of there with a job offer for the subway in the BX. And
Whoa.
No one had looked at my resume. I have a master's degree in counter WMEMD. Like, how, this expectation, like, just like we talked about, society has changed and the military has changed, right? Since the onset of the all volunteer force, military spouses have changed too. Like, we're in the double-digit percentages now of military spouses that have advanced degrees. Most spouses, if you think about it, for anyone who ever listens to this, right? You think about it, when I was in high school, which was a long time ago, admittedly, but when I was in high school and I was like a rising junior, I actually had the chance to take some concurrent college classes. And I went to college with like 18 hours worth of college credits before I ever even stepped foot on the University of Arkansas campus. So most people, for the most part, I'm not saying this is like a blanket thing, but for the most part, people are coming into the military service or into military life with some skills. They're not coming in with nothing. And they're certainly not coming in like, for the, most part, didn't finish high school or my GED or what have you. Right. So let's take a look at the people that we're trying to recruit.
Right.
And let's extend that assumption of, okay, we need these people to be really high, we need these members to be really high achieving, super smart, super technically proficient, right? And go-getters when it comes to their professional careers. And let's maybe assume that the people they choose to spend their life with might match that. They might also be similar in that regard.
Yeah. My wife, she has twice as much school as me. She's on academically on paper, she is like destroys my record. So I totally get that.
Yeah. I think there's sometimes this lack of recognition that like, look, military spouses can be like just as ambitious and just as career driven as the military members themselves. And gosh, how do we leverage that as a military? Bring them on to your team.
Right.
You need them
Utilize
to help you
them.
figure out. Yeah. You need help figuring out childcare. You need help figuring out, employment. You need help figuring out, how to manage, housing or, the other like slew of issues that the military is currently facing. Talk to a military spouse. More often than not, even if they don't have the actual like solution for you, they're going to give you a lot of insight into what's going wrong and what's not working well.
Definitely.
So we can fix it.
Do you think at that job fair, they were being kind of prejudiced against like, just assuming because you're the spouse that, you must not qualify for a lot of these higher advanced, positions? Do you think that that's what you were facing in that particular job fair?
I don't want to assume that, because I want to assume the best of people. And I appreciated that so many people took their time out to, go and set up, right, their booths and everything. So I can't really fault them for that. But I do think that there is, unfortunately, a misperception in the military writ large that spouses are limited in what they can contribute to the organization, and whether that's personally or professionally. And you see a lot of spouses, Josh, and look, I'm guilty of this too, because I love to volunteer and I love to spend my time doing that. But you see a lot of spouses volunteering their time and their skills in positions that would otherwise be paid. And it's hard to watch. Like I said, I myself am guilty of having stepped into those opportunities just because I needed something to do and needed to feel right, like I'm a part of the organization. But yeah, there are lots of ways that unfortunately military spouses just aren't considered for those opportunities, whether it's just a lack of awareness about their background and their skill and their education or what have you. But there's a real problem that military spouse unemployment is double digits, and it has been for decades now, and that we still can't seemingly get the support that we need to pass really simple legislative packages like the Military Spouse Hiring Act. And I'm sorry, I know I've kind of gone off on a tangent here, but there's a federal hiring program. It's called the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, that when a company or an employer hires a veteran or a summer, youth employee for, just a short-term summer job, right? Work at the ice cream shop, or you work at wherever for the summer, that employer can claim a tax credit for hiring you if you are in one of these, categories. Well, we had this legislation called the Military Spouse Hiring Act that was introduced in the last Congress. More than half of the United States Congress had signed on to co-sponsor this legislation, which would expand the Work Opportunity Tax Credit to include military spouses. It's a program that's meant to help populations and communities that otherwise face challenges or barriers to employment. And military spouses absolutely meet that, they meet all of those requirements, but we failed to get that passed in the 117th Congress. And part of me believes that it's because there's just a lack of real education on the fact that employers themselves often see military spouses and military spouse employees as being short-term hires that aren't worth their money or their time. And it's really disheartening. So I am hopeful that, I have every belief that if a military spouse were to find their way into an employment position, they're probably going to kick everyone's butt and it wouldn't matter. But it's just getting past that initial, like you said, that initial, oh, you're a military spouse, sometimes can be difficult.
Wow. Thanks for sharing all that.
Sorry, I know that was really long-winded.
No. That I think those were all incredible answers. I asked you 6 questions and they were really good questions and you had amazing answers. So thank you so much for that.
Thanks.
But I want to get to your talking points now. Okay. So we have a few on here. And the first one is military spouses and OAR at Ramstein. Now, does that stand for Operation Allies Refuge?
It does.
So that is the largest non-combatant evacuation operation in U.S. history, which saw to the successful evacuation of 124,334 individuals. So you're telling me in that operation of Allies Refuge, you guys as spouses had a hand in that operation?
1,000%, yes. And I would actually even go so far as to say, and I'd say this, I said this to General Brown as well as I'd say to anyone actually, that operation would not have been successful, I'm probably convinced, anywhere at any of the global, OCONUS locations, and probably certainly not in the US either. That operation wouldn't have been as successful as we can claim it to have been, without the support of military spouses. And I say that because, and this is so super important to me, I was nominated on the end of this particular experience. We had actually rolled through Afghanistan and then right into Ukraine here, obviously in Germany. And so this community was so critical and so pivotal and foundational to that operation that you had military spouses who were processing donations at the donation intake site. You had military spouses who were supporting Red Cross efforts, the USO. They were on the flight line. They were doing overnights in order to support the caring and feeding of the military members that were also pulling overnights in the pods on the flight line. You had military spouses who were feeding volunteers I can't tell you how many breakfast burritos we wrapped probably during that entire time, but it was thousands of pounds of food. And throughout the longevity of several months, it wasn't just a few days, it was several months. And so it was so, because, you know, the base was on lockdown, obviously, to anyone except for the military members and spouses, you know, families. And so all of those military spouses were spending, you know, 12, 14, 16, 18-hour days on base, helping process those donations, and then taking care of the military members who were on the front lines of the operation. And then, you know, on top of that, it actually extended to the point where there was a group of military spouses who could sew, and they were sewing, you know, prayer covers for females who needed them and wanted them. And then also, you won't believe this, people that would donate clothes to the donation site, but maybe they were clothes or blankets that needed to be like they needed to be washed, you know, they had been lightly used. And in Germany, if anyone has ever, you know, been stationed here, you will understand that the washers and dryers are like a fraction of the size that they are in the US.
Oh, wow.
And it takes like several hours longer to do a load of laundry. So there were spouses that were coming and picking up laundry items and washing them and bringing them back. Like,
holy cow.
That is just how involved. So spouses were giving money, you know, just financially of themselves. They were giving of their time, and they were, you know, for those who couldn't give time or money, maybe, you know, directly, they were feeding people. And so, or, you know, running to get tape, running to get bags, running to get, you know, this or that. So it's really important to me. We actually had 4 nominees, myself being one of them, here from Ramstein for the Military Spouse of the Year Award in 2022. And I was the fortunate one, you know, that was selected, you know, at the end of the day to represent our installation. But the promise, something that I was asked to do, and the promise that I made to them and to this community, is that whenever I would be given that opportunity, that I'd make sure that their participation and what they contributed to that effort is known, because someday there will be a movie made about these amazing military spouses that were the backbone of this entire Operation Allies Refuge. And I'm just going to be really excited to watch it.
Wow. I'm so glad that you shared that, because you know, you're right. When we read the stats, when we read the stories, you know, I didn't see anything in particular with the Air Force spouses or the military spouses, but, you know, firsthand, you saw it, you know, as our military members were maybe tied up in the day-to-day mission, right? Because that kept going. You know, you had this whole other team of people who you didn't even see coming, which was these military spouses who came in and made the impossible possible. And, you know, I want to thank you and your whole team from the bottom of my heart for being, you know, on the front lines and not even really being like the highlight or center of attention. You did it out the kindness of your heart. And so I want to also thank you and your team, the other nominees, and every other spouse at that base who did such an amazing thing for the base and for the world in a time where they needed the help the most.
Yeah, they're really incredible people. And, you know, I can't wait to share this podcast with them, because I hope that, you know, it's small, but I hope that they feel seen and they feel like their story is being told. It's just really, really important. And really, it was just a group of people who were like, okay, what needs to be done and what can we do to help facilitate that? And that's basically, you know, what they did. And there were wing command spouses out there. There were several star, you know, I mean, spouses who, you know, could have made choices to be anywhere else that day, but instead they were right alongside everyone else doing what had to be done to support this just unbelievable, you know, humanitarian effort. And so, yeah, thanks for giving me the chance to talk a little bit about that. It's really important to me.
Definitely. And you're right. I think that will be a movie one day, 100%. And I can't wait to see it too. Okay, so that was an awesome first topic here. And our second one is the AFI Air Force Spouse of the Year. And you put in parentheses, and my fellow branch winners. But can I bring up a few of the spouses that I'm familiar with that you may know?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so the first one is Bree Carroll.
I was hoping that when you talked about Global Strike, that we'd talk about Bree. Did you guys meet in Barksdale or in
So
Louisiana?
I never met her. I
Okay.
found her podcast when I was brand new, and she helped me get started because I had a bunch of questions, and I really liked her podcast, and it's called Hearts and Stripes. And she just seemed to be so like professional with it, and I just did not know what I was doing, and so she helped me start my own podcast. So shout
Yeah.
out to Bree Carroll. I did meet her husband. Super random. I know what this guy looks like, right? Because I see her pictures. I'm at AFSA in San Antonio, 2 podcasts. It was like a dream come true, right? It was this past August. It was like I did it for 12 hours a day for 5 days straight. And I was also live streaming the event. And, you know, from an airman's perspective, it was really cool, unique opportunity that, you know, I could capture things from my view from your average airman's perspective of the event. And I'm live streaming, and I see this guy. He's like he's like an exec or something to like a general. And I was like, oh my God, dude, I know you. I know you. I was like, you're Bree Carroll's husband. And he's like, he was
He's
a
so
little bit,
cool.
yeah, he's so cool, but he was busy. He's like, I
Yeah.
got it. I appreciate it, man. I gotta go. And I was like, all right, one picture. All right. See you later, man. But how random that I ran into that guy, right? And I just seemed like this crazy person who he's never seen before.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's awesome. So I saw him at the AFA conference, and it was like finally after the day had kind of, wrapped up. And so he was, got to be in civilian clothes. And that's kind of when I walked out to him. I was like, oh, I just want to introduce myself. He's like, no, I know who you are because of Bree, obviously. But yeah, so Bree Carroll was the 2020-2021 Air Force Spouse of the Year. So she was, my predecessor in this title and in this program. And she is so awesome. She really is like such a good mentor. I remember when, she kind of like started this Facebook group for the 3 Air Force finalists and was just like, hey, what do y'all need? How are you doing? How are you feeling? Here's, just being really supportive. And she and I have had several really lengthy phone conversations, just running ideas, by her, like, hey, what would you think if we kind of did this? Or what would you think about the Air Force, like, maybe doing this way? And the thing I love about Bree is like, she is so clear and direct, but really like with all the kindness in the world. She'd be like, now, Heba, they tried to do that in blah, blah, blah year, and it didn't really work out for these reasons. So she could kind of like help course correct me if I was maybe going off. But yeah, Bree is an awesome Air Force spouse, and the Air Force is definitely lucky to have her in our ranks. So she's great.
Absolutely. And we played back and forth. She tried to get on mine. I tried to get on hers. Something kept coming up. It will happen one day though, because, she was instrumental in my own podcast success. So I definitely want to give her that shout out. And I definitely want her to come on one day so we can have an awesome conversation. The second Air Force Spouse of the Year I want to mention to you is Kristen Christie. Are you familiar with her?
Oh yeah. So Kristen and I, so Colorado Springs was my first military community, and that was our first assignment with the academy. And Kristen, I knew that she was like this rock star Air Force spouse. I knew that she was super bubbly and super friendly. I didn't know much about her story up until that point. But then I ended up spending a lot of, just time getting to know her. And she said, hey, can I share my story with you? And when she did, it obviously was just like, so, it was like so emotionally impactful, but also just really struck up a great, friendship between the two of us. And so I knew that she had been a part of this program. This was my first time participating. This is my first time being nominated ever, in this program. So I wasn't too familiar with it, but I knew that Kristen had been the 2018, I believe, Air Force Spouse of the Year. And so I gave her a ring, and she was like, oh my gosh, so excited, have so much to tell you. Here are all these things that are going to happen. but she really welcomed me into my first military community, and was just such a good friend, so I love the work that she's doing, and still trying to support, her and her efforts on a day for survivors of suicide and suicide loss, and March 4th. And so we'll keep pushing ahead with that. But yeah, another fantastic Air Force spouse for sure.
And I finally got to meet her at that AFSA event that I went to podcast for. And I can honestly say I've never met anyone like her. She definitely has this like really special energy. And, we've been friends online for a while. And then when I was in civilian clothes, because I was podcasting, so I had to wear, I couldn't be in uniform. And she was in civilian clothes. So we were kind of the only two in civilian clothes in the sea of like uniforms. So I spotted her across the hall. She ran up to me, gave me a huge hug. And then we ended up having this amazing episode, which I'll probably release next, honestly, just because we're talking about it. But I got to and do the interview live in person. And it was everything I'd hoped it'd be, spending time with her. She's freaking awesome. I love her.
Yeah, she is awesome.
And the last Air Force spouse I want to mention to you that I'm very familiar with, I'm not sure if she was just nominated. I think she might have just been nominated. But we were both at Whiteman Air Force Base at this time, and that is Amber Conroy. Are you familiar with her?
Yes, you're naming all my favorite fun people. Oh man, Amber. Yeah, Amber is amazing. And so here's kind of the really interesting thing about Amber, right? And maybe she and I probably haven't even had this conversation before, but meeting Amber was coming full circle for me, because when I was on the Hill, we were working on some of these like policies and programs and benefits, right, for the veteran community and the veteran population. But I never got to see what that looked like in implementation. You know what I mean? I never got to see the other side of it, where, a veteran goes and, they're going to go get their care in the community, or they're going to go get a specialty, care appointment, and they're really well taken care of. I never got to see that as a staffer. I just got to see the black and white, language of, okay, we're going to set this up and we're going to pass this. Okay, great. But you never get to see it on the other end. And the thing that's special about Amber is that she was the person who would, ensure, right, that veterans had access to all of those great benefits and programs and policies and initiatives, right? And so that is something that I just find so heartening. There's so many, actually, Cindy Miley, the 2022 National Guard Spouse of the Year, she's an AGR spouse up in New York, and same thing. She's a veteran, as a county veteran service officer, and so same kind of, job where they are like fighting for veterans to get the care and the access and access to the benefits that they've earned. And so in my mind, that's just like such a special way of giving back to our community too, that they're active, military spouses, but here they are supporting the veteran population. And so, yeah, Amber is just, oh my gosh, she's absolutely incredible. I love seeing all of her updates on, her winning like back pay for a veteran that's like 6 figures, it's incredible what she does.
Yeah. I never met her in person, so I'm really upset about that. But when I was running the base honor guard, she reached out to me and was like, how can I help? How can I highlight your team? I'm like, who is this? Like, I had not seen someone, just a spouse out of nowhere, hit me up and want to do and provide all these things. I was like, what? Is this real? Like, yeah. And she was real. And she's super talented. I mean, I know she got to decorate the White House. She worked for Barry Law. Like, she's clearly super, super talented. But one thing that I do have to give her a shout out for is she's one of the few people, because, in my role, in my position, I get joy, and my form of gratitude is highlighting other people, right? Highlighting their story and what makes them unique, them a voice. That's my form of gratitude. So it's always about that other person. But Amber, unbeknownst to me, and when I was really down in the dumps at this point too, when I first got to Eglin, she set up like an award for me through Barry Law as a surprise, coordinated it with my wife. And it was like the most incredibly perfect. It was like a trailer on me, like even had like a trailer guy, like narrating it. Like, I was so freaking blown away. I have never had anyone do something like that for me ever, yet alone, basically a stranger who's never even met me in person. But Amber went out of her way to do that. And it definitely lifted my spirits, when I needed it the most. So I did want to give her a shout out too.
That does not surprise me, like, in the least. That does not surprise me. And you know what? I've never met Amber in person either. I've met Bree, I've met obviously Kristen, but no, I haven't had the chance to meet Amber yet. So Amber, this is me shaming you for not coming out to see me in Europe yet.
Amber, take that trip. Take the trip
There
to
you
Europe.
go.
You and Heba are going to change the world. Okay. So I did most of the talking on your topic, and I'm so sorry, but your topic was Air Force Spouse of the Year. Did we hit the mark, or is there something else you wanted to say about it? Maybe how that experience has changed your life?
Yeah, I will just say, look, I came into it kind of blind. I definitely did not know what I was getting myself into, but the opportunity to participate in this program has been just so fundamentally, like, again, one of those life-shifting moments where you're walking into a room, and we had been named to the branch winners at this point, but we're walking into town hall, and it's a week-long kind of almost, conference, and a bunch of different speakers, and just getting to know you and getting to know each other. And, here I am, and there's 6 other spouses. It was the first year that the Space Force, had, was being recognized as their own separate service, which was fantastic. And Sarah is awesome. And she works a lot on, not just voting issues, but also understanding how foreign policy, right, impacts ultimately military families and military members at home. And so it was really life-changing in that way. I think I mentioned earlier, I would have never met so many of the spouses from other services if it hadn't have been for this program. And the really incredible part is, you walk into this room, and it can be a little bit overwhelming because it's weird. People recognize you, but you may not necessarily know everyone. And I didn't know everyone in that community. So
Trust me, I know what that's like.
It's very unsettling.
It wasn't to me. I'll tell you a benefit of it. With someone like you, who you're known because you've been very vocal about it. You've spoken to large audiences, and you've made things known. But here's what I'll tell you the benefit is they know what you're all about, like at your core, like what you're passionate about. So like a lot of those barriers or guesswork is eliminated. They already know you. They're familiar with you. They know what you're all about. And it really speeds things up, especially when you're trying to get things done. That's why I appreciate it.
Yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right. Building that rapport and those relationships is really important. And this was a great, opportunity to do that. And so, you walk in, and there's like 200 military spouses. And all of these military spouses have been recognized at their local installations and across their services for, being great volunteers or being great advocates. And something that I try to tell people, especially when I'm talking to non-military affiliated audiences, or just in general, even maybe senior leaders, is that usually by the time someone becomes an advocate, it's because they themselves have experienced something really personal, or someone really personal to them has experienced a challenge or an issue. And so they have now taken it, by the time they become an advocate and put that armor on, and decide to get in the ring, there's a lot of sometimes emotion behind that, right? So you're talking about people who are really committed, like their life depends on it, like their family depends on it, because in many instances and cases, it absolutely does. And there is really nothing that a group like that cannot do when we're working together. So in my mind, the AFI, the Armed Forces Insurance Military Spouse of the Year program, is like almost that incubator for those spouses. And now I have access to, and I'm connected to, this worldwide network of military spouses. I can call Monica Bassett, the Army Spouse of the Year, and be like, so help me understand, this whole basic needs allowance thing just came out. Can you help me understand what that means? Like, why, these articles are reporting that it's going to be inaccessible to less than 1%, or it's accessible only to less than 1% of the military population. Why? And she will walk me through, okay, well, it's this wording, it's this phrasing, it's how this looks. Or, Abby McCormick, right? She's the Coast Guard Spouse of the Year, and she's working on this anti-bullying initiative, right, for military children. How, what is the Purple School program? Is it working? Are these programs actually facilitating what they need to be facilitating? Or do we need to kind of pull back and say, okay, where do we need to adjust, right, and modify things? Vinny Toth, he's my fellow Oconus spouse in Japan, representing the Marine Corps. Same thing, right? He is all about diversity, equity, and inclusion and access within organizations. So how are we as organizations ensuring that military spouses are included? They feel like they're being heard. Diverse, people from diverse backgrounds and populations, again, are included and feel like they're being heard. So there's so much that I learned from these spouses, and I can really thank the program for connecting us, for being the glue that kind of brought all of us together.
Wow. No, that's amazing. I love that program exists, because the impact that it has is just phenomenal. Just giving people like you the network and the connections needed to put your ideas to paper and then actually see it through. It's inspiring. And one thing that all y'all have in common that some people struggle with, and I know I did for many years, is you guys have a tremendous amount of purpose behind everything you're doing. And to me, reflecting on my 18 years, in purpose, that is the most powerful motivator and tool that one could ever have. That's when the magic happens and the ideas in your brain start actually affecting and changing the world around you.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I really struggled, professionally to find my purpose, and then kind of forgot that I got to choose my personal purpose too. Like, I can choose, right? I have choices to do things. And once I came to the realization that my background could still be of use, even though I wasn't working for, a member of the Senate any longer, I could still be helpful in these conversations and to other military families. I basically committed to that. And that's what I committed to in my profile. If you go to the msoy.afi.org website and you read through our profiles, the last question is, well, what would you do with this title? If you're awarded the title, and mine was, I'm going to amplify the voices of what all of these other advocates are doing. And so I feel like that's become my purpose, is helping military spouses and military families be their own best advocate, and they can do it. They've been doing it. And so helping them use their voice in ways to effectuate change is absolutely my personal purpose.
That's amazing. That's beautiful. And I don't know where this idea came from, like just with us talking now, but like I kind of started to realize that I'm familiar with you, obviously, and I'm in the Air Force, and you're in the Air Force as well to an extent. So, that's why we're familiar with each other. But like all these other people you're mentioning, I don't really have a face to them. And I don't know where this idea came from, but if there was a way that you could get the information from them to me on the most impactful book that they could ever recommend, because people love that. People love the reading list. And if we could do a military spouse of the year reading list where I can show each one of the services a picture of each one of you and the book you recommend on one picture, I feel like that would just skyrocket the awareness of this program and this award.
Oh, I would absolutely be glad to. I'll be like, look, I've got homework and it's coming from Josh. So FYI. No, I'd be glad
please
to
get me that. I would love to piece that together.
Yeah.
All I need is what book, they recommend and a picture of them and what service they represent. And I will piece the whole thing together. And I know that would be so well received. People would love that. And it would be everywhere, LinkedIn, everywhere.
Oh yeah, that would be, oh my gosh, I think they would love that. So no, I'm definitely glad to do that. That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't wait to make it. I'm so excited. Okay.
It's going to be fun.
Yes. All right. So, and I do it, by the way, I do it every year for veteran authors only. And I'll pick about 9 to 10 books, highlighting those books that I read throughout the year that are all veteran authors. And people love that. I mean, it's unique, it's a very unique approach, and it's a way to raise awareness for sure. So
yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for that opportunity.
Well, hell yeah. Okay. So here's another topic that you brought. We got 2 left. So second to last one is, what military spouses are advocating for and how the military community can help them?
Yeah, I think I probably touched on this a little bit earlier when you asked me the awesome question about what the active duty members can do to support military spouses in these efforts. And again, I think that same answer really applies, which is help advocate for us in conversations and situations that you're invited to, right? Or where you have the means. And I probably was also thinking that I wanted to share the great work that the other branch winners are doing. And so I've shared, a lot of that. Sarah working a lot on the overseas voting, obviously access to voting, which is such a huge topic right now, given some of the really concerning news reports that state legislatures are looking at limiting or restricting overseas ballots. As under the guise of voter security. And let me just tell you, look, that would disproportionately impact military families, hands down. Requiring a CAC to submit a ballot from overseas would impact military spouses and spouses that are trailing other federal employees, right, all over the world. It would impact us disproportionately. And so really helping our community understand things like that. That's what military spouses are advocating for. They're advocating for better quality of life programs, and they're advocating for fixes, to quality of life programs, policies, and initiatives that exist, whether it's EFMP, food insecurity, again, health access to health care, and some of those changes and restrictions that have come about in recent years, housing, affordable and safe housing. So there's really, no shortage of things that military spouses advocate on. And all that I'll ask of our military community is to hear them out.
Absolutely. Would you say you and all these other winners, other spouse winners, are all, one thing you all have in common is you're all advocating for something? Would you say that that's true?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, yes. All of us have an advocacy almost platform that really brought us either, into the program, or that has garnered us recognition. For some of us, that's changed. I think I mentioned Abby McCormick with the Coast Guard. She'd started out really as a housing advocate and still works with, a housing advocacy organization. But now her advocacy has really kind of shifted into the anti-bullying strategies and working on a really, I think, incredible piece of legislation that could help strengthen those programs for our military children. So yeah, for the most part, we all kind of started somewhere. I probably started in military spouse employment and then have shifted into this larger, broader civic engagement platform.
So let's add that to your homework then.
Sure.
I want to include that, not just the book. See, so my approach to all this that I find the most effective is when entertainment meets purpose, right? I don't like to have one without the other. It could be full entertaining or it could be full purpose. But if I could combine the two, that's typically where it really hits the mark. So if we could showcase each one of these winners, what their book is, that's the entertainment piece. But then a quote below, I advocate for, boom, we can add also a little bit about them. So maybe someone else out there sees, oh, she won for the Army, and what she's advocating for is exactly what I have questions on. And that might, create an opportunity for them to be, utilized to answer some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I'd be more than glad to add that to our list of homework for sure.
Perfect. Okay, here's the last topic here. And I don't know anything about this, so I'm really excited to learn about this from you. But it says, what's next? And it's an acronym called FLAG, which is Family Life Action Group. And I was hoping you could dive into that and tell us what FLAG is all about.
Okay, well, one, I have to say thanks for giving me so much of your time. I really do appreciate this more than you know. But I'm really, really excited to talk about the Department of the Air Force, so DAF FLAG, our Family Life Action Group. This is the culmination, this particular effort is the culmination of what I've been working on, and I've been brought into, this group by some amazing military members. I'm the only spouse as a co-founder. And this effort is basically to bridge that gap between military families to include military spouses, military members, and the Department of the Air Force. And what I mean by that is it's a communication tool. It's a tool, there's the policy aspect of it where instead of learning about challenges or issues that military members and families are experiencing through Facebook groups or Facebook pages, we're learning about them through this controlled communication tool that allows local community action teams and community action boards to take action on those issues and help families and military members address them there on the ground, right? Local installation level. And when they can't be addressed there at the installation, then they get elevated, right, for appropriate MAGCOM or headquarters level consideration. And I'll tell you, we're kind of borrowing from the Department of the Army here. And the Department of the Army has had a similar kind of program called the Army Family Action Plan since 1983. And through the Army Family Action Plan, they have been able to address hundreds of either modifications, changes, and even bring on new policy that has served the quality of life interests of, their Army soldiers and their Army families. And so the Department of the Air Force doesn't have anything like that until now. And that's what the Family Life Action Group, or the FLAG, is going to be. We've just onboarded like our first handful of volunteers. They're going to be focused on childcare, housing, and spouse employment. And so I'm really excited at how we are going to be able to kind of turn this whole thing on its head. And instead of a military spouse or a military member having to go to their congressional delegation to ask for help with something, this could be the opportunity to say, okay, is this a resource issue? Is this a policy, a gap in policy, or a gap in a program? Or why is this program not fulfilling its actual, original intent? And what is it that we can do to change it so that it does, and that it supports as many, families and members as possible? And so I'm really excited about the DAF flag. I'm excited about what it's going to mean for the department. I'm excited about what it's going to mean for our families. And I really, really hope that families will come to see it for the opportunity that it is. Believe it or not, actually, Mrs. Brown is kind of the reason too that some of this really got going. When she started her 5 and Thrive initiative, there was like this email, right, where they were like, oh, reach out to us, if you have thoughts or suggestions on the Thrive Guide and all this stuff. But I think what they weren't, none of us were really expecting is that her team would start receiving proposals from military members, from spouses on like, oh, hey, here's a best practice that we figured out in our community on childcare. And we've been able to bring the wait list down from 150 people to 48 in the span of 6 months because, we worked with our local, installation to do this and this and this. But with how does that get communicated out? How does that get shared? And so there's really a huge opportunity here to leverage, again, some of the best practices that our communities are coming up with, that families themselves are, finding ways to make some of these quality of life decisions, right, on their own, and things that are working. How do we help leverage and resource that so all commanders or all, leaders have a sense of, oh my gosh, did you know that at Luke they're doing this? Oh, well, it wouldn't work at Langley, but maybe it'll work at Tinker, kind of thing. So giving everyone this repository too of, okay, how do we really get after some of these things? And I think you know this, being in public health, you understand this better than anyone probably. We're going to rely on our communities for a lot, and communities want to help, but we need to be able to tell them how we need help and what we need help with. And so this is just, I'm really excited that this is going to be a great chance for us to work more collaboratively with not just with communities, but across installations, even within the service.
Wow. Is this being utilized at all at any base right now?
It hasn't been rolled out to any installations yet. We're still working with like headquarters, CAT and CAB teams. We're actually also kind of on the market for a tech solution on a platform to provide us like some of the issue management software systems that we're going to need to roll out. So if you know of anyone, please let them know. We would be interested.
Yeah, his name's Master Sergeant Jeremy Rutherford at Whiteman Air Force Base, because he's the one that put our honor guard on the map, because he developed the software that every base honor guard uses now for tracking. Like,
oh, I love it.
He is a straight up genius. I tell him he's the most talented airman I've ever met, and I truly mean that. So, maybe he could help. And he has students that have to do freelance work as part of their like school, their education, because he's in the reserve. So on the civilian side, he's a professor. And yeah, maybe he can get one of them students, a group of them students to make this thing happen for free, because that's part of
that would be awesome.
So yeah, I'll send you after this, his info, and I'll give him a heads up that you might reach out to him and kind of ask him some questions about what you guys have in mind.
Yes, and I'll say thank you in advance for even talking to us. I really appreciate it. But I mean, we have some wicked smart, airmen and big A, all the A's. But we just have some really, really wicked smart military members that are helping on this, and fellow co-founders. And I just really appreciate them so much. And this is, in my mind, this is the kind of legacy thing that someday when I'm like long gone and no longer a military spouse, and like 18 years from now, it'll be something that leaders and families will look to and say, oh, this was just such a great resource or opportunity, right, to voice concerns and challenges, but also all the great things that are happening in communities all across the globe. So really excited for it. Thanks for letting me share a little bit about it.
Yeah, of course. And I do have a recommendation for like a starting point. Would be your True North bases. I don't know if you've heard of True North, and I don't believe it's at every base. I know when it rolled out, it was targeted at more of the isolated bases that, not like Luke Air Force Base, but more like Whiteman Air Force Base. That's, much farther away from cities, right? And with these True North programs come committees to help prevent suicide and drug abuse and alcohol abuse. And those committees meet like every week. And so I could easily see the Family Life Action Group being a part of those committees that are already taking place. There's already that platform there. It might be able to just fit into that. So just an idea for a starting point. I think it would be very, very well received in that world.
Well, and yeah, we're working really closely too with the Fortifying the Forest Initiative and Chief Bass and Chief Toberman, because I mean, like you said, absolutely, we know that a handful, right, of these challenges or these experiences can unfortunately really be exacerbated. Some of the mental health issues can be exacerbated by sometimes underlying quality of life ones, right? And when your housing is kind of all out of whack, when you're having financial, problems or issues, those can turn into maybe preventable, mental health ones. And so we are working really, really closely with the FIT team, to see kind of, again, where we can help support one another and one another's efforts, and make sure that, resources are available for those who do need that mental health intervention when they need it.
Definitely. I love that. So we're gonna come to a close here. We had an amazing conversation, Heba. First of all, you're a natural communicator, clearly, because I talk to people all the time, and I can tell you are gifted at communicating like your intent and kind of tying in your emotions and your purpose with that. And so I am not surprised at all that you were selected to win that award and be the voice of so many that don't have one. And so I just wanted to leave you with just my thoughts on you and what you're doing. That my wife as my spouse pretty much saved my life. That's a story in it of itself, right? But my wife basically saved my life, helped me turn my life around, helped me believe in myself. And honest to God, I don't even know if I'd be alive today if it wasn't for her love and her support that helped shape me into the man, the airman, the father now that I am today. And so our spouses are such an integral and important and amazing part of everything that we do. And I think you are such an amazing example of what a spouse can do. And I just wanted to thank you for being you, for being that voice, and for helping us from the bottom of your heart. And I just can't thank you enough for that.
No, thanks, Josh. That really does mean a lot to me. It's been, it has been, and it's going to really be like the actual honor of my life to have been named an Air Force Spouse of the Year. And, we're going to keep working at it. And just all that I'll ask is, and I know you're going to do a great job of this, but just making sure that people know that whatever we have to do, like, you don't ever have to go at it alone. We're going to do it together, and it's all figure outable. It really is. That's a real word in my mind. It may be messy. It's going to take time. Sometimes it might not look exactly the way, we all envision that it will, but we will get there. We will get there, and we can do that together. So I hope that, as you continue on in your service, and that your family knows that there are a lot of people behind you, and you may not know them, and you may not know all of them by name, but we have a real interest in seeing you succeed, because your success is the success of not just our own, families, but really the success of our military overall, and the success of our country. And we feel that deep sense of patriotism too. So just thanks for what you do. Thanks for elevating the voices of all of our military members and our families. It really means a lot. And thanks to all of your, past and future guests too, for speaking up and using their voice to support others and to support our future. It wouldn't happen without them. So we really will owe all of this to them in the end.
Wow. Well said, Heba. That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for your time. And if you're still thank you for listening to the hero's journey of Heba Abdelaal. And we're out.